Hi guys, James back again. I was feeling motivated, so I wanted to do yet another video. And really only restricted by when I get the chance to do them, and I wanted to do another one again. So, as a special note though, if you check out my last video, the top 10 action films, I made a note in the description, but in case you don't read through that, there was a movie I referenced there, the Baytown Outlaws, and there's a character played by Thomas Brody Sangster that I mentioned more than once that he's playing a character who's handicapped. An older term, what I meant to say was special needs. So I didn't think of the proper term at the time, so that's what I meant to say. Excuse me. So, for this one, it's a list that I had been working on for a while, and it was a little tough to narrow it down. Excuse me, a little less tough when two of the films that would have been high on this one got used for another list, the top 10 weird ones, those being Holy Motors and Itchy the Killer. And so the ones I was left with it was easier to narrow it down. Plus, I took one out, which would have been fairly high on this list, and it's going to go on another one. I'm just trying to work out one of two lists it could work into. Anyway, back to this one. This is the top 10 foreign language films. I had been meaning to do this one for a while. And I love all the movies on this list, but I like I like the idea of this list. Because I do watch a lot of foreign films, a lot of Korean films. I'm a big fan of Korean cinema. And there's a few on here. So, okay, let's start. So, we'll start with number 10. Suspense. Number 10, we have a Spanish film from 2001 called Intacto, directed by Juan Carlos Fresnadillo. And he went on to direct a few English language films, one of them being Intruders with Clive Owen, which I hadn't got around to watching yet. But one of the other ones was very well known. It was the sequel to 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later. This was his first film. And it involves sort of the world of lucky people. Gamblers, people are just naturally lucky. But in this world, your luck can be stolen by someone who's luckier than you by simply touching them. You could steal their luck. And the entire movie's in Spanish, with the exception of one actor, and that is Max von Sydow. And I believe his character is referred to as, well, they say his name is Sam, but I believe, what do they say? I think his character Sam. Okay, but I thought they referred to him as the Hebrew, or he has a term that they refer to him as, but it says his name is Sam. Anyway, he's the only one who speaks English in the movie. Everyone else is speaking Spanish, but he seems to be in a high place of power in terms of luck. But there's also another guy who's known as the luckiest man alive, and the way they go about determining people who are lucky. There is one particular scene where a bunch of people who are trying to compete to be the luckiest person have their arms tied behind their back and blindfolds covering their eyes, and their task is to run through a forested area. And you just see people running through, crashing into trees and falling down, and the person who makes it through without colliding with a tree is obviously the luckiest one. And it's just an insane scene. But the concept of the movie is a little on the strange side anyway. Not so much that it'd be like one of the really super weird movies, but it's a unique, I'd say it's a fairly unique concept or plot device for a movie. Anyway, so that is Intacto. Number 9, we have a French film from 2001 as well, called Vidocq. And this is directed by Pitoff. I can't remember the rest of his name, but he's credited as Pitoff. And he went on to direct an English language film, not very well regarded, Catwoman. But this film is pretty impressive, and it was known as notable, it says, being the first major fantasy film to be released that was shot entirely with digital cinematography using the Sony HDW F900 Cine Alta camera. And I believe it just barely beat, I think, Phantom Menace, because Phantom Menace used it. It may have used it before it, but this film was shot entirely with it. Anyway, this one stars Gerard Depardieu and Guillaume Canet, who's a French actor, also director. And Vidocq is sort of a police detective, and at the beginning of the movie, he's killed by this mysterious individual with a mirror mask, and you find out he's known as the Alchemist. And it's sort of a murder investigation movie. Cops trying to catch a notorious killer, and the effects are pretty impressive in this movie. It's very well shot, and it doesn't look too HD as some movies did that were shot entirely in HD, but it's really neat, and it also has a great song from it, which was a collaboration between Matsy Sayer and Apocalyptica. And the song is called Hope Volume 2. And there's a music video on the DVD, if you can find the DVD. But yeah, so this is Vidocq. Number 8, we have another French film from 2009 called McMax. This was done by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, who did, I believe he did Amélie, but more notably, he did Alien Resurrection, the 4th Alien film. Well, this one involves a character named Basil, who has some tragedy in his life, loses his father. He's working in a video store, and there's a shootout nearby, and a stray bullet buries itself in his head. And so he gets shot in the head, survives, but he's sort of living his life on the verge of any wrong movement of the bullet could kill him. And he manages to find his way to this junkyard and this assorted cast of very strange characters. And they all form this little group, and they decide to come up with a plan to take down these two competing weapons manufacturers. As in, because his dad was blown up by a bomb, and he was shot. He was a bystander in a shootout. So they want to get rid of these weapons manufacturers, and they come up with a little scheme to pit them against each other to take them both down. Very, very charming movie. Quirky. And I don't know that I recognized any actors really in it at all. Omar Sy from X-Men Days of Future Past and The Intouchables, the new show Lupin. But no, I don't recognize anybody else. Basil is played by Danny Boone, if that helps. McMax. Number 7, we have a Korean film called The Wailing from 2016. This one has a nearly 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, and it is an intense movie. You get this small village, and this stranger comes to the village, and then, but it coincides, phrase it, around the time the stranger comes to the village, this mysterious sickness starts to infect the village, and people start dying. And they don't know whether he's just bad or if he had anything to do with it, but they come to a conclusion or a rumor that he may possibly be a demon of some sort. And so a father who wants to protect his daughter has to enlist help from people in town to get to the bottom of this, find out what's going on and what is the true nature behind this mysterious stranger. And there are some impressive makeup effects that I won't go into that are used in this movie, and it's I don't want to I need to say borderline mystery thriller. It says horror film. There are some horrific elements, so I'd be willing to go along with that, calling it a horror film. The Wailing. I heard some other films by this director, Na Hong Jin, are pretty well regarded, but I haven't been able to find them. And I don't recognize the cast. I don't recognize the names of the cast, but I see so many Korean films that some of the names stick out to me, but I can't put names to faces. But the ones sometimes used by Park Chan-wook do stand out. And some of them may be in here, I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, that's The Wailing. Number 6, we have a Dutch film from 2008 called Left Bank. This movie is strange but very cool. And it stars Eileen Cuppins, who I didn't recognize, but the male lead in the movie is Matthias Schoenaerts. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name properly. And this was the first thing I saw him in. Then years later, he pops up in some English language films, and he puts on a very, very convincing American accent. Like, he popped up in The Drop. He's in one of the more recent ones is The Mustang. He's in The Danish Girl. He is in Rust and Bone with Marion Cotillard, which I have, but I haven't watched yet, but it's highly regarded. Anyway, this film is sort of, Eileen Cuppins plays Marie, and she's an aspiring track star, and she ends up injuring herself, and she gets involved with Bobby, played by Matthias Schoenaerts, and moves in to his apartment with him. And shortly after, strange things start happening in the apartment building, but also to her. Like the injuries she suffered, this black sort of powder or dust starts coming out of her wounds and other parts of her body. And there is some mythology behind what's going on in the film that they get into, which I won't say. But there is something at the heart of this building that is the source of the sort of dark elements that are occurring, and Bobby may or may not have something to do with it. It is impressive. This is one I just found just by chance. I'm like, oh, this sounds good. I don't know if I saw the preview for it or not, but this one, it sounded good, so it was a blind buy, picked it up, and it's really good. As Left Bank. Left Bank is a notable area of Antwerp. Let me see. It says when she moves in with Bobby, her charismatic new boyfriend, who lives in a deluxe apartment in Antwerp's stylish Left Bank. So it's this stylish neighborhood of Antwerp. Okay. Number 5, we have a Japanese supernatural horror film called As the Gods Will. And this is the film by Takashi Miike, and this one could have fit on the weird film because it is very off the wall, and it has not a battle royale element to it, but these large cubes begin hovering over the town they live in. I don't know if I can't remember where, but I don't know if they say. But the kids in classes these strange objects or creatures come into the classrooms and sort of hold the kids hostage and force them to play games. And whoever survives moves on to another game, and on and on and on and on until there's a winner. And a lot of the ordinarily you see blood and guts in a Takashi Miike film, but for an example, there's this bouncing comical looking head at the front of the class, and some of the kids start to approach it, and it turns around and stares at them and yells, and they explode into these red balls, like a bunch of red little ping pong balls, instead of like bursting and their body exploding in blood and guts and stuff. Excuse me. And they discover a pattern that, as long as the head isn't looking at them, they can move closer. It's sort of like statue. Once turn around and look, you have to freeze. If you move, you're dead. And then it turns back around, and you can get closer, and you have to hit this button on the back of the head to end the game, to win the game, to end it. And the games get progressively more strange and dangerous. And it's very entertaining, but it's very weird, as a lot of Takashi Miike films are. But I really enjoyed this one. As the Gods Will. I don't know where the title came from, but it stands out. Let's see. Number 4, we have a French film from 2007 called Inside. Now, they made an American remake of this a few years ago, which is pretty good. Probably one of the better American remakes of a French film that's come out, or a lot of the horror remakes that have come out. Not so much with Martyrs, or hell no with the Cabin Fever remake, but this one involves a pregnant woman who loses her husband in a car crash, and time goes by and she's due to give birth soon, and these people start to attack her house, assault her house, trying to break in to she thinks to kill her. And there's I think there's a few men, and there's this one main woman who's behind it all. And I don't want to say too much, because you find out who these people are and why they're attacking her as the movie progresses. If I was going to do a spoiler thing, I'd go into detail, but that's not what this one is. That's not what this list is about. But they're trying to kill her and get her baby. That's all I'll say. So that is Inside. Not for the faint of heart. This movie gets a little graphic. Number 3, we have a film called... This was not intentional. This was not intentional. It's a movie from 2016. It is a Chinese action film called... And it's at number 3. This movie is called 3. It's a coincidence. I just realized it now. And it's a film by Johnny To, well-known Chinese director. And it involves sort of a cop, a doctor, and a criminal. And the cop, in a shootout with a criminal, the cop shoots the bad guy in the head. And he survives, and he's brought to the hospital, but he won't let them perform surgery on him to remove the bullet, because if they do, it'll prove his guilt. So he's stuck in the hospital bed. The cop can't do anything to him, and the doctor might be in on it. And the criminal is basically threatening them, saying, like, my guys are going to come and get me. So you better get out of here. And like, no, we need to get that bullet out of you. And it's like a Mexican standoff kind of thing, but it's like a 3-way. And it's very interesting. Very interesting. The not so much the cat and mouse, but the back and forth between the cop, the criminal, and the doctor and all that stuff. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. That little triangle, hence 3. Very interesting movie. Number 2, we have another Korean film, which is a remake of a Chinese film. This is from 2018. The movie is called Believer, and it is a remake of the Chinese film, also done by Johnny To, called Drug War. Now, I saw Drug War a few years ago, and it was highly rated, and I watched it, and I wasn't all that impressed. I didn't see what the big deal was about it. Now, this one is supposedly a remake of Drug War, but I watched this, and I love this movie, and I'm like, how is this a remake of Drug War? I see no similarities. I don't remember any of this happening in Drug War. Now, whether or not this was their interpretation of the movie or their version of remaking the original script, because between the script stage and the filming stage, a lot can change. And so anyway, I love this one, and it's basically a cop trying to, I think it's they're trying to bring down Asia's biggest drug cartel, run by a man called Mr. Lee. Now, nobody knows who Mr. Lee is. Nobody ever sees him. So various criminals get it in their head to pose as Mr. Lee, whether to take advantage of the lack of his absence, his or her absence, or to just continually to mess with the cops. So there's more than one criminal who purports to be Mr. Lee. And let me see. Directed by Lee Hae-young. I think this one had some recognizable actors in it, but again, I'm not so good with putting their names to faces. But this one, if you stick it all the way out through to the end, it's really, really well done. The story is really well told. And apparently, it was the final film performance of Kim Joo-hyuk. I don't know who that is. He plays Jin Ha-rim, a Chinese-Korean drug lord. Can't remember if that person's Mr. Lee or not, I don't know. So this is Believer, not The Believer, the white supremacist movie that Ryan Gosling did early on in his career, which was also pretty good. But no, this is not that. Believer. Number one. Now, I picked this one because it is a Park Chan-wook film from 2002, Korean film. And it's the first film in his Vengeance trilogy. Now, most people know Park Chan-wook from Old Boy and stuff he's done more recently, like The Handmaiden and Stoker and stuff, but most single out Old Boy as one of his more notable films. But he actually did three. He did the trilogy, and the second one is Old Boy. That's the middle film. The third one is Lady Vengeance, also known as Sympathy for Lady Vengeance. The first one, though, is called Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. Now, I've said before, I believe, on one of the films, Running Scared, the Paul Walker film, where I had seen that before this, and it was sort of like, how bad a day can someone have? How much worse can this guy's day get? That kind of pales in comparison to what happens in Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. Because you've got a guy and his girlfriend who he's trying to get a kidney transplant for his sister, and him and his girlfriend hatch a plot that goes way wrong, and it's very complex what happens in the movie. They end up kidnapping someone, holding them for ransom. They're going to use that money to get the kidney operation, but things between when they hatch the plan and start to execute the plan, there's even more stuff that goes wrong, goes very south in the movie. And it's not by any stretch of the term a happy movie. A lot of stuff goes wrong, and I wouldn't say it even has a happy ending. But it is just astonishing, this film. It's my personal favorite of the Vengeance trilogy. I like it even more than Old Boy, just because how intense and how dark the movie gets. The script the script for this movie is just out of this world. And let me see, the actors in this movie, Duna Bai, who's been in other movies. She was in Cloud Atlas, I believe. And Song Kang Ho. I do recognize a lot of the actors in this, or at least some of the main ones. Anyway. Yeah, this one I can't recommend highly enough. Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. Like, I would go Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, then Old Boy, then Lady Vengeance. Lady Vengeance is good, but after seeing Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Old Boy, it's a little bit, not a letdown, but... And the three movies aren't really... It's hard to tell how the three are connected, but you could watch them in any order if you wanted to. So if I were to suggest an order, I would say watch Lady Vengeance, then watch Old Boy, then get your mind completely blown by Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. That's my opinion. Anyway, so Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, and that is the end of this list. So, I hope you like this one. Like and subscribe if you feel like it. And I will see you on the next one. Toodles.